So head along there and check it out. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian. How are you?
Is that it? Are they going to be sort of guaranteed to be relegated now, regardless of if they manage to overhaul this?
Well, I think it's really interesting from that meeting on Tuesday. There's still a lot of anger and a lot of frustration, I suppose, from the other Premiership chairmen and other Premiership clubs. And it looks like they're going to have to offload players to be in line this year with the salary cap. So it's
incredible that happened. They got the massive points deduction and the fine, and they still haven't got their house in order.
Well, it's a bit unprecedented. Usually the accounts are audited at the end of the year, but they obviously made the decision to monitor Saracens as they go through the season. And that's what Tuesday effectively was, a disciplinary hearing, basically saying, look, you're still having your house in order fully, and what's going to happen. So they're, according to the Times, Saracens are having a meeting this morning about what they do and how they sort this problem out. And Ed Griffiths, who took over from Nigel Ray, he's indicated that there has been mistakes. So there's some people will say that they've done nothing wrong, and these business deals with the Vunipola brothers, Owen Farrell, Etoje, Richard Wigglesworth were not part of the salary cap. The hearing and the panel decided that it was part of the salary cap. So they've kind of buried their head in the sand a little bit. What's really frustrating here for everybody involved, and it's in some ways it's kind of unfair on Saracens. The findings weren't published, and there was a decision made not to do that. Lord Dyson, is it, or what's his name?
Former ministerial.
Yeah, he even said last week that it should be published, so that there has to be clarity. And if there is wrong, and then it's hard on the players like that, Nathan Zast and George Cruz, because they're kind of stuck in the middle of all this, and it's administrative errors that Saracens said happen and mistakes happen. But because they were deducted at 35 points and the fine of 5.3 million, and they didn't appeal it, it would indicate that there's wrongdoing there. So in simple reality, if you sign up to an agreement, I think their arguments were that the business deals and the companies that were set up by Nigel Ray and the players weren't part of the salary cap. I think that's where the issue is, that it's been found that they are part of the salary cap.
Difficult hole to have to dig out.
So they've you know, there is that asterisk is behind Saracens, and that's the reality of it.
I think it by all accounts, it looks like they're going to have to lose a lot of those players. They're probably going to be guaranteed to be relegated to the championship. And by the way, I think that is an awful outcome. That not for them, because who cares about what happens to Saracens ultimately if this is the way they've managed to behave with their business dealings. But for the teams that will be looking to come back up from the championship next year, because even without some of the top line players, they're still most likely going to walk that championship.
Covered Saracens.
That's very unfair.
I've covered Saracens for Virgin Media in the last in a couple of rounds in Europe, and even the 2 Munster games, they chopped and changed a bit there, and they still have an incredibly powerful side. They've loads of really talented young English players. Their academy players coming through are phenomenal. And they've just but they basically have loaded their squad with top quality players, and then the top earners, the English internationals and stuff, I suppose, are on big money to hold on to them. And there's talk that they're trying to get Liam Williams off the books actually earlier than the end of the season. He's going back to the Scarlet. So Brad Barrett is out of contract, Alex Lazowski's out of contract, George Cruz could be heading to Japan. So there probably will be a situation now where they're going to try and offload players, and of course the talk is then that they're trying to offload players as it is off their squad.
Well, that at least proves or demonstrates some sort of proactiveness.
Well, there's a little bit of panic there as well, because I think if they don't get this sorted, because of the anger, particularly the Exeter chairman and Rob Baxter, the coach, have been very, very outspoken about what Saracens were doing. So it's a real mess for them. In a sense, I have some empathy for them because of Mark McCall, but they're not that popular. Incredible side, but that team that beat Leinster last year in the Champions Cup final was so balanced.
Give it to the
No, not Europe, but definitely the Premiership ones. Definitely the Premiership one. Europe is a little bit different because you're playing the French sides with bigger budget as well.
John Smith has been in touch on YouTube, says, gotta love the Irish living in their ivory tower. Never made a mistake in their life, he says. I mean, thanks for the comment, John.
Right, okay.
Paul Kentucky says, he asked the difficult questions and he came hard, but he's a journalist and that's his game. 2 boys left the studio at red bottoms, probably waiting for the journalist in the car park some night. That was from George Cruz in conversation with Nathan last night. I'm sure, look, we'll leave that there. Do keep the comments coming in. Let's get into the Irish stuff, obviously, Quinny, this week. I haven't had a chance to have you in since Johnny Sexton was confirmed as captain and the squad was named. He's quietly craved this, clearly, for a number of years, Johnny Sexton. It was mooted, I know, it might have been post-Brian himself, and there were other candidates. And I know when he was asked about it at that time, he would have always said, listen, it's not befitting of a future Irish captain to discuss it, so I won't. At a time when there was a lot of other candidates for the position very vocal about it. What is this? Is this a short-term thing for the next couple of years while they blood somebody else in and there's a bit of transition, or is there some possibility this guy keeps going for the next 4 years?
Well, I think everything should be short-term now with the Irish rugby side, and the policy of just focus on the next game type scenario, even though it's very boring, we hear that a lot from sports people. I think there's no need to look too far ahead now, because we've probably made that mistake before, getting involved in World Cup cycles and stuff. So if I'm working off that premise, I think Johnny Sexton is going to be a great captain. I'm a massive fan of Johnny Sexton. In a sense, in some ways, I was thinking after the World Cup, make James Ryan captain and start this cycle in the next few years. But you know, in some ways, it's maybe better for him. Let's see how this goes this year, next year. But Johnny Sexton will do a really good job. He's massive respect from the players, and he's really, really driven.
Do you have any issue with a 10 being captain?
No, I don't have I don't have an issue with. I think you need, if you have a backs captain, and it worked really well with Ireland, where Dricko was captain and then Paul was pack leader, and something happens, Dricko looks into Paul, what do you want to do? It's really, you kind of give the decision whether we're kicking to the corner or having a shot at goals to the forward leader and stuff like that. So it's not an issue, I think, and that's the way it'll have to work with Johnny Sexton, whoever the pack leader is. And the senior players take hold of that. So he's the right man if you're not going for the younger next cycle scenario, which would have been James Ryan for me. So I don't have any issue with it, because as I said, I think Sexton is it just depends. The downside here would be if Johnny Sexton doesn't play regularly. I hope he does for his own sake. And I did a piece of pre-Christmas or maybe after the World Cup, and it wouldn't surprise me, and I know people might say, well, Johnny Sexton will be 38 going to the World Cup. It wouldn't surprise me in any way at all if he did do that, because I think as long as he keeps the body right and keeps the performances up, he's a fantastic player. And maybe the whole change will suit the likes of Johnny Sexton, where he is. There's been change in the coaches, and I've said this a few times, it's up to Mike Catt now to give them whatever kind of attack they want and develop the game a little bit more and move the Ireland game plan to a different level and have that kind of direct approach when needed, but also have a very expansive approach. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how it pans out. I suppose that negativity will still hang with the squad for a long time, but anytime I played or was involved in the Six Nations, it's massive. So it's really important, and hopefully they'll get off to a good start in the next couple of weeks.
The new broom obviously might help with some of that, brush through some of that newish broom, some of that negativity, and also the a bunch of new players coming through, including in the back row, which is actually on the face of it looks like one of the most competitive areas that we're going to have. What's your starting back row for Ireland?
This is a very difficult one. I think Josh van der Fleer starts at 7, and then, you know, with Peter O'Mahony and CJ Stander, they're both under pressure, and there's no doubt, and there's calls for change right across the board in certain positions.
Take blindside. Where would you go?
I don't think Andy Farrell is going to change a huge amount of players straight away. I think people will get a chance and a benefit to play. The problem for CJ Stander and Munster is, even though, and I thought both of them played really well last Sunday away to Racing, when your team is not winning, you're under pressure. And John Klein has paid the price for that, even though genuinely I thought he's been one of the bright lights for Munster in Europe. Yeah, I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was brilliant last week, and I thought he was really good against Saracens as well in that away fixture, and he's making more carries. He was really good in Connacht. But if your team is losing, Niall Scannell as well probably had his best game in a long while last Sunday for Munster against Racing. But if your team is not winning, you're under pressure, and that's just a reality. So the collective is stronger than the individual. So I just don't. I'm not sure if Stander and O'Mahony will both be selected.
Right.
That's just my hunch, and I think Max Deegan, Caelan Doris, one of them could start in that back row. I just think the way Max Deegan has played in the last few weeks. Sensational.
Talk me through your blind side. Like the options on the face of it are, from the players that have been named, Jack O'Donoghue, Peter O'Mahony, CJ Stander or Max Deegan.
Well, if you pick the form players, people might say this is crazy. Jack O'Donoghue and Max Deegan should be in the Irish back row.
Right.
I think Jack O'Donoghue has been absolutely fantastic for Munster.
So you go Jack O'Donoghue,
and that's
6.
why he's in it. No, I think I'm not saying what I would go. I'd say if you're picking the form.
Where would you go?
I would have Max Deegan in there, and either or Peter O'Mahony or CJ Stander.
Right.
I think you need some experience there, and you need a bit of grizzle there as well. I think, as I said, Peter and CJ, who are fantastic players, they have been for Ireland. They're under massive pressure, and these younger players, Deegan and Doris, are bringing that pressure. Jack Conan is still out injured. Just look at someone like Rhys Ruddock, who hasn't been selected in the squad. It's very, very difficult on him. So maybe Max Deegan.
That's 6.
I don't know.
He's an 8 with, as Doris is an out-and-out 8. Deegan is an 8 with capacity to play a little bit.
Why are you pinning me about the starting back row? O'Mahony, Deegan and Van der Fleer and CJ Stander to come off the bench.
You have to get. You're just including him now, just for the sake.
No, I think they're not going to. He's not. There's no way, and I don't think he should cast either of them aside. I think if you're picking on the foreign players, it'd be very unfair to leave out Max Deegan now.
Yeah.
I think he deserves a crack at it. I said pre-Christmas that Caelan Doris could be in line to start, but.
You wouldn't be tempted to put him in. There is a temptation.
Put the two of them, put Deegan and Doris in together. Well, it hasn't happened really with Leinster in Europe, so you're not going to do that with Ireland straight away.
And you're thinking Deegan over Doris at this stage?
Well, I think that's the way it's gone in the last few weeks, and I just think his numbers and his stats have been phenomenal, and he's really seemed to have ignited his performance in the last few weeks, probably on the back of the frustration of not starting away to Northampton when Caelan Doris was selected really as the kind of number 8. So probably on the back of that, yeah.
Talk to us about Munster. Obviously, Ospreys this weekend, and the conundrum is they're needing Racing to beat Saracens. They themselves will need to beat Ospreys with a bonus point, and all as long as Glasgow, Northampton and Gloucester all fail to win. Improbable. Going to happen?
Say Glasgow failed to win, Northampton failed to win, and Gloucester failed to win. Is that it? They're not improbable. It just depends what Leon do with Northampton. If Leon are out, they've top 14 next week, so it just depends what their mentality is like. I don't think Northampton are a great side, and I think they were fortunate last week against Benetton. Again, Sailor are out of it, so what do they do with Glasgow coming to the AJ Bell Stadium? I think the one that's really going to scupper them here is, I think Saracens are going to beat Racing. That's the problem, the biggest problem, because I think the other results, Toulouse will beat Gloucester, so the other ones are not crazy results, really. Yeah. I think the one for me is but then what's happened this week with Saracens as well, does that affect him this week, and does it affect Mark McCall's selection again? If he plays his full Saracens team, they can beat Racing with a bonus point at home, because they can be that good. So yeah, there's a lot of results to go their way.
What's your take on Munster generally? There's been Billy Holland's been out this week, Keith Earl's out this week and saying, listen, we're not the Munster of old, we are what we are, and people they're judging us a bit too much, and we're not that far off, consider some of the quality of the teams we've played. Is there a case for that, or is that just trying to rationalise what's happening at the minute? Which
no, there is a case for that.
I think
someone tweeted me yesterday saying, oh, look what Keith Earls is saying. They linked to an article he did, and I went back and I looked at a few of the articles, and you know, Keith was there in 2008. He was with a lot of the older, the successful Munster sides that won the European Cups. He was there and he knows, and it is a bit unfair, and I've said this many times, it's unfair to compare. What's different nowadays, Adrian, is the expectation is so much higher. And, you know, I'm doing a piece in it tomorrow, and I've criticised Munster before, but I just think that they've been a little bit unlucky. Are they good enough? No. Can they get better? Yes. Is it all doom and gloom? No, it's not. It was a very difficult group, and they haven't had any sort of consistency in selection. And actually, I think where the damage was, it was the Racing game at home, and they actually played really well in that game from an attack point of view. Saracens was always the first day against Saracens. The weather was so horrendous that it was very difficult for both sides to play any sort of rugby, or for them to chase a score when there was a bit of vulnerability. They were, you know, uber competitive and very, very good performance away at Saracens, and Racing last week, 71 minutes they were leading. So the glass is probably half full at this point. A number of years ago, I thought the glass was half empty because of structures. They brought in Graham Rowntree, Stephen Larkham. I think there's 2 world-class players coming next year. What they do need to do now, which is really important, is they need to make some change and around the squad. Players who are out of contract, they need to fill the next tier, the tier below the internationals. They need to make sure that that's better. There is some good younger players coming through. They need to integrate them between now and the end of the season. And then if they get themselves into knockout stages, you know, they're in Pro 14, which is a minimum requirement now, or even get to a final, I think they could be, you know, they could really salvage their season. So it's not as bad. And you know, so Keith, what he's saying is true, and I think I do agree with it in a sense. If I thought there was lack of effort, lack of passion, lack of an ambition to get better, like that's what happened before when I was critical, I would say it. So it's just a high expectation there, and when you won European Cups, and Munster haven't lifted a trophy in 8 or 9 years, so it's there's always going to be a bit of pressure, but some teams never win a trophies, you know. They've just got to go with that and hope that some of these younger players that have played in the Ireland 20s in the last 2 years come through, and in an ideal situation, you want young players to come through and actually challenge, and you look at him and you say, well, he's potential to be an international. It's not he's potential to be a Munster player.
Yes, yeah.
If you understand what I mean by that.
And there are some of those at Munster.
Yeah, you know, there is the Wycherley brothers. I think Gavin Coombs is a really good player. Jack O'Sullivan, Shane Daly.
Jack O'Donoghue, another one.
Yeah, Jack O'Donoghue was there a couple of years, and I think he's really played well in the last few weeks. So, of course, it can be better. But I think maybe the overseas players that they have who are not at that level, they need to look at that situation and the impact they're making. But it's disappointing, and it's always disappointing not to be in knockout stages. And that was kind of the yardstick we judged ourselves on. Make sure you're in quarterfinals, and then you can look back in the season. We lost lots of semi-finals and a few quarterfinals and a couple of finals as well. But if you're in that mix, then, and I think in the last few years getting to semi-finals was a really good achievement with what they have. They've just got
an overachievement probably.
Probably, yeah. And you know, Edinburgh probably should have beaten them in the quarterfinals last year. It is very disappointing, and I think Munster fans are always going to be frustrated. But that's talking about what Keith is talking there. There is an expectation, a pressure, whether it's fair or unfair, it's just there.
Yeah, well, we'll all have the calculators out over the weekend. Quinny, thanks, we'll enjoy it. Thanks a lot. We've got plenty coming up over the course of the next hour. Shane Stapleton is going to drop into the studio to preview the AIB All-Ireland Club hurling finals this weekend. Kenny Cunningham's going to talk football, and we'll have our top 5 stories as well. Back in a moment.
OTB AM.